Welcome to the Bladed Tech Channel's 158th edition of our Milestones series in space exploration, science, and technology, and the 81st edition of our Rewind series on space exploration, science, and technology. In this video, we will not be revealing historical milestones of the week, but instead be looking back at 2021. This video is a follow-up to our 2020 year in review, Milestones 51. We will also be reissuing our 2019 year in review, Milestones 102, in order to incorporate the first half of the year, as well as the COVID-19 outbreak. On January 5th, 2021, Amazon announced that it had purchased its first fleet of airplanes to support order fulfillment. Prime Air actually launched in 2016 with leased planes, but the purchase of airframes, 11 Boeing 767-300s, represents an escalation in their business model. Package delivery companies such as DHL, Federal Express, and UPS are watching Amazon's moves warily, well aware of the company's ability to leverage capital in a bid to compete in their market. As of yet, Amazon has stuck to delivering its own packages, but the danger to their businesses, whether through negotiation leverage or outright competition, is real. Potential customers for an Amazon delivery service may want to proceed cautiously. The recent heavy-handed dealings of Amazon Web Services, where they control 50% of the outsourced server market, offers an abject lesson in the risks of trusting Amazon with business infrastructure. On January 12, 2021, Adobe ended its Flash Player web browser plugin. Released in 1996, Flash was once one of the most popular ways for people to stream videos and play video games online, but it was plagued with security problems and hindered in its transition to the smartphone era, when Apple's Steve Jobs famously refused to support the plugin in its browser Safari and in iOS for its iPhone and iPad devices. Jobs died in 2011, but Apple disabled the Flash plugin by default in Safari in 2015. When Flash was first released, a majority of internet users connected via dial-up connections that were very slow by today's standards. Flash let web designers and animators deliver exciting content that could be downloaded relatively quickly. The app's popularity continued as successive versions of HTML were released without native video support, making it necessary to run Flash and competing programs such as Silverlight. However, the need for a video app plugin was eliminated in HTML5, which finally added native video support. On January 18, 2021, presumptive Samsung chairman Lee Jae-young was sentenced to 2.5 years for his part in a bribery scandal involving former President Park Geun-hye's administration. Lee has been running the company since his father, Lee Kun-hee, suffered a heart attack in 2014. The older Lee died in 2020. Lee will be likely credited for 6 months' time served, but that will still leave Samsung rudderless for about 18 months, unless the conglomerate elects to name another as chairman. Samsung is perhaps best known for its smart devices based on Google's Android operating system, such as handheld phones and tablets. But it also has a Leviathan presence in consumer electronics, semiconductors, shipbuilding, construction, insurance, and advertising. On January 22, 2021, Google's Loon project announced that it was scrapping plans to set up a company to build giant balloons to beam the internet to rural areas. Loon was a long-term experimental bet from the tech giant's X business unit. The balloons were the size of tennis courts and self-navigating. Loon chief executive Alastair Westgarth wrote, quote, "Developing radical new technology is inherently risky, but that doesn't make breaking this news any easier. Today I'm sad to share that Loon will be winding down. While we found a number of willing partners along the way, we haven't found a way to get the costs low enough to build a long-term, sustainable business." It is likely that SpaceX and OneWeb's business models led to Loon's demise. SpaceX had successfully launched several hundred broadband satellites into orbit and has begun beta service in several countries. OneWeb is far behind on satellite launches, but clearly has the capital to follow through on its plans for a competing constellation. On January 24, 2021, Google threatened to block Australia following the proposal of a law that would mandate a royalty agreement with every news organization that appears in search results or in Google News. Online companies have generally siphoned off most advertising revenues from traditional media outlets, and the biggest offender is US-based Google. Google and its tech giant peers have successfully lobbied the US Congress to head off similar legislation. Google Search was for years technologically superior, but the quality gap has been closing significantly in recent years. Microsoft's Bing engine and privacy-centric DuckDuckGo have become increasingly viable alternatives. Open-source platforms like US-based Gigablast are also options. Restrictive governments control their own native search engines, such as China's Baidu and Sogu, and Russia's Yandex. On January 29, 2021, the U.S. Space Force revealed its new rank structure for officers and enlisted personnel. Unsurprisingly, the service for the most part is adopting the U.S. Air Force ranks, the service branch to which the Space Force is subordinate. The only change the Space Force made is in 4 categories of Air Force enlisted ranks called Airmen. The equivalent ranks in the Space Force will be Specialist, similar to the rank names used by the U.S. Army. The announcement was only news because the House of Representatives had passed an amendment in the National Defense Authorization Act of 2020 requiring the Space Force to use the Navy's rank structure. The use of Navy ranks was proposed by former Navy SEAL Representative Dan Crenshaw. However, the Senate version of the act did not include the provision on naval ranks. In a compromise bill, the House agreed to strike the requirement. The Trump administration had not shown any particular preference. Nevertheless, the Air Force waited until after the Biden administration to take power to make their announcement. On February 13, 2021, the Coca-Cola Company announced the launch of its trial of the very first paper bottle. The prototype is made by a Danish company from an extra strong paper shell that still contains a thin plastic liner and a plastic cap. It is not clear what challenges are raised in recycling mixed paper and plastic bottles. The test is part of a longer-term bid to eliminate plastic from its packaging entirely. This requires eventually designing a plastic-free bottle capable of preventing gas escaping from carbonated drinks that also ensures no fibers flake off into the liquid. The hope is that a plant-based coating will be found that can take place of the plastic liner. February 18, 2021. NASA's Mars 2020 mission, containing the Perseverance rover and Ingenuity helicopter drone, lands on Mars at Jezero Crater after 7 months of travel. We covered Perseverance in episodes 38 and short 49A. On February 23, 2021, Huawei unveiled its Mate X2 folding screen phone. The double-screen device is unique in its thinner folding profile over that of the rival Samsung Galaxy Z. The phone is priced at $2,800, which will likely limit its demand, and chip supply problems due to a U.S. national security embargo will limit supply. The launch coincides with a report from market research firm Gartner that shows Huawei sold 40% fewer handsets in the fourth quarter of 2020 than the same quarter of the previous year. In addition to the chip embargo, sales have been impacted by being unable to offer either the Play Store or several of Google's other apps, including YouTube, Maps, and the Chrome browser, as a result of the U.S. trade sanctions. In contrast, sales at Chinese rival Xiaomi have not been impacted as yet by the embargo. On March 2, 2021, microblogging site Parler dropped its antitrust lawsuit against Amazon in this date, replacing it with a new suit accusing Amazon of defamation and breach of contract. The move came after the company fired its CEO and co-founder, John Matz, and the relaunch of its website a month after Amazon Web Services summarily pulled its hosting services. Parler is controlled by Rebecca Mercer, a former investment banker and the daughter of American hedge fund manager Robert Mercer. The Mercers are perhaps best known for the connection to Breitbart News and defunct political campaign consultant Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica was discovered to be using questionable data mining and scraping practices to target voters and fell under regulatory scrutiny in the UK and the US. Amazon had deplatformed Parler only hours after Apple and Google banned its app from their app stores. In shortly after the infamous January 2nd, 2021 storming of the U.S. Capitol building by right-wing rioters. Amazon accused Parler of acting as a conduit for the rioters, although it was later revealed most had coordinated on Facebook, while others had used Gab and Twitter. The deplatforming effectively shut Parler down while the suddenly toxic company scrambled to find another web hosting service. California-based web infrastructure company SkySilk later stepped in to help bring Parler back online. Legal pundits had said that Parler appeared to have a legitimate breach of contract case, perhaps casting doubt on the broadness of the original antitrust claim. It might have been those doubts, coupled with the vast financial resources available to Amazon to fight such a suit, that led Parler to withdraw its original suit and refile. On March 16, 2021, it was reported by media outlets that the new Google Nest Hub will track users' body activity in bed to generate personalized sleep tracking reports. The device's radar-based scanning technology detects movement, including coughing and snoring, as well as light and temperature changes. But the new features have been criticized for collecting data in an invasive fashion with little benefit to the users. Google responded by saying that data collected would not be used to direct advertising to users, indicating that the search giant had perhaps not understood, or was ignoring, the privacy concerns that the device had raised. Many consumers have willingly supplied private information in exchange for free or subsidized products, such as Facebook's social networking software or Amazon's Alexa microphone-linked search software. The consumer's seemingly unending appetite for such products continue to encourage companies like Google to offer them. On March 24, 2021, OneWeb launched 36 more broadband internet satellites on a Soyuz rocket from the Vostochny Cosmodrome. The launch was funded by a $400 million capital raise from SoftBank and Hughes Network Systems. SoftBank was an original investor in the pre-bankruptcy organization. The company is majority owned by the UK government and Bharti Global. It was the second major launch of satellites for OneWeb, who hopes to field a 648 satellite constellation. OneWeb's business model differs from that of SpaceX, its major competitor for broadband satellite internet services. The company intends on selling coverage only to other businesses and government agencies. SpaceX has designed its service for consumers as well as businesses and government agencies. OneWeb is working off $1.4 billion in post-bankruptcy funding and believes it will need another $1 billion to complete its first-generation constellation. On March 31, 2021, Microsoft announced that it had been selected by the U.S. Army to supply 120,000 augmented reality headsets at a cost of $21.9 billion over a span of 10 years. The headsets are based on the company's HoloLens product, which allows users to see holograms laid over their actual environment. The enhanced HoloLens will provide heads-up displays that will enhance situational awareness of the battlefield. The production contract follows the $480 million development contract awarded in 2018. The $3,500 commercial version is already used by NASA, although the Army version appears to cost $182,500 a copy, suggesting ruggedization and capabilities far beyond the type NASA uses. On April 5, 2021, in a little-noticed ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court, Google was handed a victory over Oracle in a 10-year-old computer code theft case. Oracle had sued Google in 2010 over the use of 11,000 lines of code from the Java API in the Android operating system. The court ruled, in essence, that the ubiquity of the Java API in software development made the code's adoption by any programmer fair use in spite of it being copyrighted. The ruling overturned a lower court's opinion in favor of Oracle, and Google trumpeted that it was a big win for, quote, innovation, interoperability, and computing. Oracle snarled in impotent rage, saying that the court had increased Google's power further and damaged other companies' ability to compete. The company's general counsel said, quote, they stole Java and spent a decade litigating as only a monopolist can. This behavior is exactly why regulatory authorities around the world and in the United States are examining Google's business practices. On April 13, 2021, the CCP directed billionaire Jack Ma's Ant Group to restructure, imposing restrictions on the activities of Alipay, China's largest digital payment service, and affiliated credit card and consumer loan operations. The move was couched in terms of consumer data protections, although it comes on the heels of some high-profile moves by the CCP to rein in Ma's business empire after he criticized government regulators in October of 2020. Ant Group's $37 billion initial public offering was canceled by regulators in November of 2020, and Alibaba Group, Ma's other large e-commerce company, was fined $2.8 billion a few days before the Ant Group restructuring announcement. Jack Ma disappeared for 3 months after his public criticism of the CCP, only resurfacing in a staged video teleconference in January of 2021, and otherwise appearing to remain under effective house arrest since. No word on what will be Ma's eventual fate. April 19th, 2021. NASA's Ingenuity helicopter, part of the Mars Perseverance 2020 mission, performs the first powered flight on another planet in history. As previously mentioned, we covered Perseverance in episode 38 and short 49A. On April 30th of 2021, the European Union charged Apple with breaking EU competition rules over the way it runs its App Store. The case is looking specifically at how its App Store policies affect music streaming. The charge was initially filed in 2019 by co-founder of Spotify, Daniel Ek, who said that Apple was, quote, limiting choice and stifling innovation. Apple's official response to the charges stated, quote, at the core of this case is Spotify's demand that they should be able to advertise alternative deals on their iOS app, a practice that no store in the world allows. They want all the benefits of the App Store, but don't think that they should have to pay anything for that. The Commission's argument on Spotify's behalf is the opposite of fair competition. EC and US regulators have a series of ongoing investigations into the Commission structure of Apple's App Store, which is a flat 30% for most developers, except for those with less than $1.4 million in annual sales, for whom the Commission is 15%. Anti-competitive practices by Apple in selectively blocking apps it doesn't like, such as Parler in January of 2021, or Google and Facebook in January of 2019 and August of 2020, are not covered by the EU probe. Enjoying our content? We issue new videos every week, so be sure to subscribe so you stay current. Subscribing is free, and we encourage you to browse our 350-plus video library, where you can find more Milestone installments for every day of the year, as well as tech documentary segments, current events in space exploration, science, and technology, gameplay recordings, reviews of tools and equipment, and reviews of small electronics and appliances. Each video is tagged with an alphanumeric identifier in the title, so searches for particular segments are quick and easy. On May 14, 2021, the CCP's Zhurong rover landed on the Mars surface after its release from the Tianwen-1 orbiter. It was China's first independent interplanetary expedition, and from all accounts, a wildly successful one. Without NASA's and Roscosmos' benefit of decades of unmanned interplanetary space travel experience, the success of the Tianwen-1 mission is quite remarkable. The European Space Agency provided China with ground support for the launch and early Earth orbit phase, and later during its trip to Mars, as well as data and expertise to support the selection of potential Mars landing sites. Initial images from the lander and the release video from the orbiter were released to the public on May 21st. Zhurong is equipped with 6 science payloads, including an instrument for analyzing surface elements and minerals, panoramic and multispectral imagers, a climate station, a magnetometer, and a ground-penetrating radar. The mission purportedly aims to return data on potential water ice deposits, weather, topography, and geology, complementing science carried out by missions from other space agencies. On May 19, 2021, Colonial Pipeline CEO Joseph Blunt confirmed that the U.S. pipeline operator had paid the hacker group DarkSide $4.4 million to unlock the company's servers from a cyber attack that had shut down its pipelines and halted gasoline and aviation fuel shipments to much of the southeast United States. The fuel shortages caused chaos for 2 weeks and sharp spikes in prices at the pumps, assuming you could get gas at all. Blunt appeared to lay the blame for its decision on the Biden administration, which had publicly said that the company should pay the ransom for the good of the country, rather than relying on a lengthy effort from the US government's law enforcement and intelligence services or private computer security services to rescue them from their own security folly. Previous administrations had made it clear that US companies should not pay ransoms to hackers in an attempt to save money on recovering their computer systems, as it would encourage and fund continued criminal activities. And to that point, media sources have said that DarkSide has collected over $90 million in ransoms in recent years. The incident resulted in some unexpected fallout. DarkSide itself endured an attack on its financial network after the Colonial Pipeline takedown became public, causing the criminal group large losses. It is not clear whether it was the US government or someone else who was involved. And the revelation that much of the US's fuel distribution network was reliant on a single pipeline laid bare the consequences of environmental groups' successful political fight to prevent new pipelines from being built. On May 27, 2021, Amazon agreed to purchase MGM Studios for $8.5 billion. The deal includes MGM's library of about 4,000 films, including the James Bond franchise and Legally Blonde, as well as 17,000 television episodes, including those from the Handmaid's Tale TV series. The acquisition marks Amazon's second biggest after it bought upmarket grocery chain Whole Foods Market for $13.7 billion in 2017. MGM Studios' creditors have been running the content creator since its bankruptcy filing in 2010, and after a series of acquisitions, the studio seemed to find its feet. However, the pandemic and its effect on movie theaters spurred MGM Holdings to sell the studio in December of 2020. Amazon is under rising scrutiny for anti-competitive practices, so it is hard to imagine how an acquisition of MGM will help it deal with regulators. The online retail giant already controls a significant amount of content through its Amazon Prime Video service, and it also produces films and TV programming through its own studio. There was no announcement of when Amazon MGM thought the deal would close. On June 7, 2021, Google has been fined nearly $270 million by French authorities for abusing its market power in the digital advertising sector. Specifically, the investigation found that Google gave preferential treatment to its own advertising server, DFP, and its online ad auction house, ADX, in part by providing information about rival bids. As part of the first-of-its-kind settlement agreement announced by the French Competition Authority, Google also agreed to change some of its advertising practices to make it easier for competitors to use its online ad tools as a result of the agreement. Google's promises to change its practices are only binding in France, but the company claimed it would be making changes in a number of other national markets. There was no word as to which markets to which Google was referring. The French investigation came after the News Corp, French newspaper Le Figaro, and Belgian press group Rossel filed a complaint against Google in 2019. Also on June 7, 2021, the Juno spacecraft performs its only flyby of Jupiter's moon Ganymede, the first flyby of the moon by any spacecraft in over 20 years. On June 16, 2021, the Shenzhou 12 capsule and its crew of 3 launched on the Long March 2F rocket from the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center and docked with China's Tianhe space station hours later. It is the first crewed visit to the facility. The crewed mission is the third of 11 launches planned for the construction of the 3-module space station. Arrival of the Shenzhou 12 meant that it was the first time since May of 2000 that 2 orbiting space stations will be simultaneously inhabited. The feat was previously achieved when NASA's STS-101 shuttle mission and the Russian Federation's Soyuz TM-30 capsule visited the ISS and Mir, respectively. The Chinese space program benefits from significant technology transfers from Roscosmos and the European Space Agency. The space station has been in planning since the Shenzhou program inception in 1992. The CCP is not permitted by NASA to use the International Space Station over concerns of the potential for US space technology to be misappropriated for military purposes, and thus the People's Republic of China has been forced to build its own space infrastructure. China and Russia intend on building a jointly managed base on the Moon by 2036. On June 23, 2021, space tourism company Space Perspective announced reservations for its high-altitude hydrogen balloon that will take passengers to 18 miles in altitude, high enough to give an impressive view of the curvature of Earth. Flights are expected to commence in 2024, with ticket prices that will start at $125,000. The company ran its first flight test on June 18, 2021, from the Space Coast Spaceport in Titusville, Florida, which will lift off from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida and land in the Atlantic, where passengers will be retrieved by boat. The edge of space is defined by NASA and the FAA as 50 miles in altitude. Their Kármán line, or the height at which spaceplanes no longer can ascend without rocket propulsion, is 62 miles. Space tourism competitor Virgin Galactic requires 5 days of abbreviated astronaut training, while Blue Origin likely has a similar requirement. SpaceX is offering space tourism packages on its Dragon and Starship craft, both of which are either orbital or interplanetary, and will require full astronaut training. There is no word on what training is required for a ride on the Neptune. June 19, 2021, Blue Origin successfully conducted its first human test flight with a reusable New Shepard rocket delivering 4 crew members into space, including Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, Bezos' brother Mark, 18-year-old Oliver Damon, who became the youngest person to go into space, and 82-year-old aviator and Mercury trainee Wally Funk, who became the oldest person to go into space. In an August 20th, 2021 report, NASA's Office of Inspector General said the next-generation spacesuit the agency is developing for the Artemis program, known as the Exploration Extravehicular Mobility Unit, or XEMU, wouldn't be ready for flight until at least April 2025 and may be subject to further delays. The OIG also noted that other factors, such as delays in the development of the Space Launch System, the Orion capsule, and the Human Landing System would also preclude a 2024 landing. The report identified several factors for the delay, such as technical issues, funding shortfalls, and impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. NASA has spent an eye-popping $1 billion on new spacesuit designs, including the XEMU, since 2007, 2/3 of which was dedicated to the peculiarly articulated XEMU design. The amount of contractor graft and engineering incompetence required to blow $1 billion on a lunar spacesuit seems incomprehensible. Worse, years of funding are still required, due much to NASA's requirement to lighten the heavy and bulky suit. Let's hope that SpaceX is working on something better for its Starship program. On September 28, 2021, Amazon introduced a household robot called the Astro during its fall product reveal. The $1,499 robot has a 42-inch arm with an artificial intelligence camera that can recognize faces and also play music or TV shows on its 10-inch touchscreen. The robot is essentially a mobile Alexa device. The Astro can move up to 2 miles per hour and can travel over various surfaces like hardwood, tile, or carpet. However, like iRobot's Roomba robotic floor cleaner, the Astro cannot navigate up and down stairways. Is there an untapped demand for an Alexa device that will follow you around to spy on you on Amazon's behalf? We'll keep you posted. Have you agreed with our choices, or do you think there are other events in space and tech history that were better? Go ahead and share with us by dropping a comment below. If you have suggestions for other space and tech milestones, let us know. We'll credit milestones we pick for future videos to those viewers that post them. And don't forget to click the bell notification icon so you don't miss upcoming videos. On October 4th, 2021, Arizona space tourism company Worldview announced it was developing a balloon-delivered capsule that will be carried to altitudes of about 19 miles. Called the Explorer space capsule, the craft will host 8 passengers at $50,000 a seat and 2 crew for flights lasting 6 to 12 hours, giving people an over-the-horizon view of Earth close to that seen from space on suborbital flights. The company expects the flights to begin in 2024. The nonprofit organization Space for Humanity, which offers spaceflight experiences for those who cannot afford tickets, has committed to purchasing all the seats on the inaugural flight. Rival space balloon tourism company Space Perspective, founded by 2 former Worldview executives, Jane Poynter and Tabor McCallum, has already made its first uncrewed test flight with its craft, and said it was starting to sell tickets at $125,000 per person for flights also targeted for 2024. We covered Space Perspective in Milestones 115. On October 27, 2021, Boeing announced it is taking an additional $185 million charge against its earnings to cover the costs to troubleshoot and return its CST-1000 Starliner commercial crew vehicle to the launch pad, following an abort of the OFT-2 flight in August. The company announced the charge in its release of its second quarter financial results. Boeing had already taken a $410 million charge in January of 2020 to cover the costs resulting from the software failure experienced during the OFT-1 launch in December of 2019. OFT-2 was scrubbed hours before scheduled liftoff when valves in the spacecraft's propulsion system failed to open. Engineers found that 13 valves were stuck shut, most likely when nitrogen tetroxide propellant seeped through the valves and mixed with moisture, creating nitric acid that corroded the valves. NASA has since reshuffled ISS replacement crews to SpaceX, which continues to launch Dragon crew capsules on its Falcon 9 rocket. On October 28, 2021, Facebook announced it was changing its name to Meta, which would, quote, focus on bringing the metaverse to life. Welcome to the next chapter of social connection. The name change was formally announced by Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg during the company's virtual reality and augmented reality conference, Facebook Connect. Zuckerberg, it seems, is experiencing a midlife crisis. Facebook went on to say in a blog post, quote, the metaverse will feel like a hybrid of today's online social experiences, sometimes expanded into 3 dimensions or projected into the physical world. It will let you share immersive experience with other people even when you can't be together, and do things together you couldn't do in the physical world. Presumably, the company was referring to the intrusion of data collection devices such as cameras, Ring, for example, and microphones, Alexa for another example, into homes and businesses that will be leveraged for Facebook's benefit and profits. Hopefully, consumers and entrepreneurs will wake up to the danger before that happens. On November 4th, 2021, satellite company Astra Space filed an application with the Federal Communications Commission to deploy a constellation of more than 13,600 satellites that would provide broadband services. The first phase of the constellation would involve 40 satellites in an equatorial orbit at an altitude of 700 kilometers. A second phase would launch 2,300 satellites at the same altitude. That would allow the company to provide global service. A third phase, with 11,300 satellites, would operate at 400 kilometers in altitude to provide additional capacity. The company would presumably launch its constellation using a variant of its Rocket 3.3 vehicle. On November 20th, 2021, Astra's Rocket 3.3 booster LV-007 successfully reached orbit after launching from the Pacific Spaceport Complex in Alaska. The rocket was carrying a demonstration payload for the United States Space Force. It was the company's first successful launch. Astra Space has 3 launches of its Rocket 3 series planned for the first half of 2022 and is currently developing a successor, the Rocket 4. On December 8, 2021, the New York Post revealed that over 200 U.S. newspapers were suing Facebook and Google for destroying their advertising revenue stream by allegedly stifling competition. The lawsuits are being filed on behalf of some 30 different companies that publish all over the United States. Google said in response, in a statement to the Post, quote, "These claims are just wrong. the online advertising space is crowded and competitive, and our ad tech fees are lower than reported industry averages, and publishers keep the vast majority of revenue earned when using our products. For those viewers that don't remember or were born after 1995, newspapers before the internet age were sustained by local advertising and classified ads. The free exchange of information on the internet and the introduction of digital media essentially destroyed the newspaper business model, bankrupting many and forcing the survivors to reduce or eliminate hard copy printing, raise paywalls, and convert to a digital media model. The result has been a less than gentile industry, if that is the proper adjective, that is reliant on clickbait and sensationalism and has eschewed the neutral reporting of the news. Do the newspapers have a case? And even if there was such a case, will the incredible political clout of tech giants like Google and Facebook allow for online advertising reform? We have yet to find any industry experts who think so. And if the newspapers win their case, will the genie that is digital media be squeezed back into his bottle? We'll keep you posted. On December 13th, 2021, Colorado Governor Jared Polis, a Democrat, declared that the COVID-19 pandemic in his state was over. All mandates related to the virus were lifted by the state, although local mandates could remain in place. Polis said, quote, "Everyone has had more than enough opportunity to get vaccinated. Hopefully it's been at your pharmacy, your grocery store, a bus near you, or big events. At this point, if you haven't been vaccinated, it's really your own darn fault. I didn't hesitate to issue a statewide mask mandate in the emergency. The emergency is over. You know, state public health officials don't get to tell people what to wear. That's just not their job." Although a number of states, largely led by Republican governors, have relaxed or refused to impose COVID-19 mandates, none have declared an end to the pandemic, making Polis the first to do so. Notably, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control has not declared an end to the pandemic, and some states like New York are tripling down on pandemic mandates. We covered the origins of the pandemic in our 2019 Year in Review, Milestones 102, and we'll keep you posted on any significant updates. December 25th, 2021. Arianespace launched the James Webb Space Telescope on an Ariane 5 rocket from the Guiana Space Center on this Christmas Day. The mission was a $10 billion joint effort between NASA, ESA, the Canadian Space Agency, and the Space Telescope Science Institute. The Webb Space Telescope is the successor to the Hubble Space Telescope. James E. Webb was the NASA administrator from February 1961 to October 1968, and is generally recognized, along with Wernher von Braun, as the father of the Apollo lunar program. The Apollo program ended in 1975, and NASA has not returned to the moon since. We covered Webb in Milestones 56. This is our third year producing content. We would like to thank our viewers for choosing our content among the many fine quality choices that are available. Did you agree with our choices of the major space exploration, science, and technology events for 2021? What events do you think were relevant? Let us know by dropping a comment below. We hope you enjoyed this 158th installment in our Milestones series. If so, click that like button. Once again, don't forget to subscribe, or just stay in touch by following us on our microblogging accounts, which are listed below, the community feed for this channel, our Instagram feed, and our Minds page. We announce all new videos and post some unique content on those outlets. And if you prefer an alternative video distribution source, consider visiting our channel on Rumble. Thanks for watching.